My name is Stephen Carroll, and I'm going to talk to you today about getting started with the SENCER SALG. And the first thing that you might want to think about is what is the SENCER SALG? SALG itself stands for Student Assessment of Their Learning Gains. And this is an assessment instrument for assessing students' learning gains. It's a free instrument, and it is available to you courtesy of the National Science Foundation. And this is the website address that you will go to access it. And the first thing I want you to stop and do is to think about what value you and your students get from the kind of student evaluations that you do at your university now. And so I would suggest at this point that you just pause the recording for a couple of minutes and write down some things that you think your students get out of filling out their student course evaluations. And then write down some of the things that you get from the student evaluations of teaching that you do now. So one of the reasons why you might want to try this instrument as opposed to other ones is that almost all student course evaluations, which are sometimes called student evaluations of teaching or SETs, almost all of them focus primarily on teacher behaviors and or student satisfaction. And the problem is, of course, that neither teacher behavior nor student satisfaction are particularly related to your course goals, and they're not really good proxies for student learning. So they may tell you something about why students like your course, and they may give you feedback on your own behavior, but they're not going to tell you very much about what students actually learned in your course. And as I'm sure you all know, those SCEs rarely provide you with any specific details about your course. In other words, they don't give you actionable items that will help you make specific improvements in your courses or in your teaching that would make this a better experience for you and or for your students. I also want to point out that students get very little value out of filling out these course evaluations. In other words, they go through it because they're required to or because you ask them to. How seriously they take it is, of course, up for debate. But generally speaking, they don't get anything out of that experience. And we also know from a great deal of research that these kind of student course evaluations punish innovative teaching. So the rule seems to be that to the extent that you step outside of students' expectations about what is supposed to happen in your kind of course, they will punish you in the only way that they can, which is to give you a low student course evaluation. So, for example, if you show up as a male instructor in a nursing course or a female instructor in an engineering course, you already have something going against you from their perspective. And if you do things in your course, if you innovate in your course in ways that they don't expect, they're going to push back. So they're going to give you a lower course evaluation score. So the SALG itself was designed specifically to avoid these problems. It was created so that students would provide teachers with detailed, specific, meaningful feedback to teachers about what helped them learn and how much they learned and what in specific they learned. More importantly, it was also designed to promote metacognition in students. It was designed to help students improve their learning by helping them become better self-assessors, by helping them learn to monitor and to evaluate their own learning at regular intervals and therefore to get better at it. So one of our grounding principles was that student course evaluations shouldn't just be something for faculty or for administration. The students should get something out of it too. Some other reasons you might want to consider. SALG is a valid, reliable instrument, and most of the course evaluations that are in use right now in the United States, very few of them have been tested for validity or reliability. So in this case, we know that the SALG provides you useful, actual knowledge about what's going on in your course. It has been around since 1997, and in 1999 was put online, so we have a very long track record. It's used at the moment by almost 11,000 college and university professors, and we have a data set of about 1/3 of a million student responses. So we have a very deep and robust data set. SALG is free, as I said, and as a bonus, many accrediting agencies are starting to accept SALG data as evidence of student learning. So those of you who are working on or affiliated with accreditation processes, that'll be something extra that will be of value to you. So the basic principles of SALG. When we embarked on this project, we had two basic foundational principles and one sort of additional goal, if you will. And our principles were, first, that it's only sort of fair and efficacious to measure teaching effectiveness in terms of the specific stated goals of the course. It's not fair to evaluate teachers according to rubrics or to goals that they weren't informed of beforehand. So we want to measure things only in terms of what is publicly stated and what are the explicit goals of the course. Our second principle is that students have something valuable to tell us about what they learned in our classes and what helped them learn it. So we're very insistent upon this principle that we're not going to try to manipulate what is essentially student self-report data and try to package it in certain ways or manipulate it in certain ways to make it more respectful, or respectable, I guess. So the idea here is that we want to respect students' opinions and we want to treat what they have to tell us as intrinsically valuable. And the goal, or the extra bonus that we wanted to include, is that we wanted students to get something out of this for themselves. We wanted them to benefit from the experience of filling out a course evaluation. So in this case, that comes through their opportunity to reflect metacognitively about their learning experience and to become better at that kind of self-assessment as a result of going through this evaluation process. So how does it work? SALG consists of two main parts. There are 10 overall questions, which are the STEM questions. And underneath those 10 STEM questions, there are a number of sub-questions that you can ask, which are customizable. And so the first 4 questions relate to your learning goals. And those are divided into 4 categories: understanding, skills, affective or interest gains, and integrations or habit formation. And the mnemonic here is USA1. And I want to point out that these first 2, understanding and skills, correspond to the lower levels, the 3 lower levels of Bloom's taxonomy. And so those are lower order thinking skills, and they're relatively impermanent. They're not durable gains. And the higher end, the affective gains and integrations, are looking more at attitude shifts and emotional responses that control people's willingness to continue to engage in certain behavior and to turn that behavior into a habit, which is an indicator of a long-term, relatively lasting learning gain. So we're hoping in the long run to move people beyond assessment of only these understanding and skills and get them to think also about how their courses are affecting students in terms of changing their motivations and engagements, and as a result of that, changing the way that they've integrated the ideas in your course into their lives in ways that are relatively durable. So this instrument serves as a kind of faculty development tool as well as an assessment tool. The second 6 questions focus on pedagogy, and as I said, these are customizable things. So they focus on course design, which would be things like what your course focuses on, what topics you've selected within that general area, the pacing of your course, that kind of thing. Class activities, what do you do in class? What kinds of things do you ask students to do outside of class? Graded assignments, including tests, papers, homework, that kind of thing. The resources you use, which would of course include a textbook, other reading assignments, online materials, any kind of field trips or guest speakers, all that sort of thing. Meta information can be as simple as, do you give your students a calendar to work with? Or as advanced as, do you teach them different study techniques for different kinds of material that they're going to be expected to master? So there's quite a range of kinds of meta information you can include there. And the final category, support for the individual learner, revolves around interaction with personnel. So of course, interaction with the teacher, both in class and outside of class and office hours, but also with people like TAs, peer educators, could also include lab assistants, library personnel, Anybody that any kind of persons that the students are interacting with would go into this category. So then we're interested in questions of validity and flexibility. So the question here is, how can you preserve validity and reliability and yet allow it to adapt to the specifics of your course? And after repeated testing, what we've discovered is it is the construct itself, which is the identity and the stability of the 10 STEM questions and the scales that they use that give us the validity. So that validity and reliability come from the fixed features of the SALG, and yet you can change the individual content within those larger overall questions, and you will still get valid, reliable results. So it's going to be customized to your specific needs, your specific goals, your specific pedagogy, and yet you're still going to get valid, reliable results. So we encourage people to make modifications to their instrument, because the more it's customized to your needs, the more useful it will be to you. So as you see on this slide, there are a number of places on the instrument where you are asked to fill in concepts or assignments or resources, and it will just list those things here, and in essence force you to fill in those concepts or assignments or such like things. So this is our way of sort of prompting you to make this instrument your own, and to take it and make it specific to your needs. Again, sort of how does it work? In terms of scheduling, there's the option of using a baseline survey, and about a third of our users use baseline surveys at the beginning of the term. And the baseline survey is simply the first 4 questions. Those are related to the course goals. And they assess the student's level of achievement at the beginning of your course in relationship to those goals. Obviously, we can't talk about pedagogy because the class hasn't happened yet. And then, of course, at the end of the term, the SALG will measure the gains that you've made relative to those same goals, and then we can ask the pedagogy questions as well. Also, many people choose to run the end-of-term instrument as a midterm survey to sort of check in along the way and see how students are doing. At the end of the process, when the students have taken your survey and filled everything out, you will get some results back. And those, on the site itself, you get a pretty detailed set of analytical tools. So obviously we'll provide you with a number of students who answered at each point, the mean of their answers, standard deviation, mode, number of answers at the mode, so on and so forth. You get a histogram for each question set. You can aggregate statistics across multiple instruments, especially a useful feature if you have small courses where you don't have enough students or enough answers to give you reliable numbers. You can aggregate across that same course after you've taught it multiple times. You can do crosstabs to see what varies with what. It allows you to code the text on the open-ended answers, so you can do qualitative analysis. And you can download the entire analysis into an Excel spreadsheet, which you can then deliver to your department chair, to administrators, or to whatever. Or you can repackage and put into SPSS, so you can do more detailed analysis. So beyond the SALG itself, you can also use the SALG at a departmental level. And in this case, by department, we really mean group. And so if I'm doing a research project or I want to collect data from a number of people, what I can do is I can go in and I can make a template, and I can then lock certain questions, which I say, okay, these are the questions I want to collect data on. So I make my template, I lock my questions related to those group goals, and then I essentially deliver my template to the people in my research group, and they open it up, and those locked questions can't be deleted and they can't be modified. So everything else can be. In other words, these faculty still have the option of making that instrument very much their own in every other way except for these specific questions. At the end of the survey, the departmental administrator, the group administrator, gets data back only for the locked questions. The instructors, of course, will get data for all the questions. And the purpose for this is that we want to allow people to collect data for research, but we also want to preserve the ability of the individual instructors to experiment and to innovate and to make things their own. So remember that this whole instrument was designed with the purpose of encouraging and protecting pedagogical innovation. So we've set this up so that the data is segregated in a way that allows a group to collect data of interest to itself in terms of research project, and within that to preserve the independence and the anonymity of the individual faculty so that they can continue to collect data about the specifics of their courses without worrying about somebody sort of looking over their shoulder and seeing what's going on and things that they have no business looking at. Now, the SENCER SALG is a specific research group instrument, so as I said, it's a group instrument, and it is used by the SENCER project to collect data across the entire research group. So one of the most important things that we ask you to do is to use the SENCER SALG itself and to associate your SALGs with SENCER when you set them up. So when you are actually completing your SALG, it will give you the opportunity to affiliate your instrument with this project, and once you do that, it will make the data, again on the locked questions only, available to the people who are collecting data on the SENCER project. I'd also point out that the SENCER SALG is the most advanced SALG in terms of it connects questions related to pedagogy to questions related to goals much more carefully and much more systematically than any of the other SALGs do. So even if you're not affiliating your course with the SENCER project, you may want to use this one as a starting place just because it offers you these advanced capabilities. So it would be a good place for you to start. The last thing I want to note is that the SALG user community has donated a great deal of instruments that are in a public repository that is searchable across a number of variables: course, department, educator, author, year created, all those kinds of things. So those are good places for you to look for things that will give you ideas about how to set up your own instrument. I'd also point out that your own word of mouth in spreading this to your colleagues will help develop this data set and will help develop the database behind it and make this a more useful tool for all of us. And it might be perhaps obvious, but the data that you collect using the SALG is particularly useful for scholarship of teaching and learning and for your publications, and so this is a good way of collecting data on your teaching and on the learning that happens as a result of it. So thank you all for listening, and I've provided you here with the website again, and some of this material is also available at metalearninghabits.org, and there's some further explanations there that you might want to explore.